All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started here today. Welcome to today's webinar. Today's webinar is on how to minimize business interruption during the coronavirus outbreak. Thank you all for attending today. I hope you will be able to take away some key strategies to help put a contingency plan in place during these very stressful times. My name is Mark Booman. I am the Chief Revenue Officer here at Gaia. I've spent more than 20 years in logistics and supply chain management solutions, and I currently oversee the sales, business development, and marketing teams here at Gaia. Gaia is a leading software platform for logistics and supply chain automation. We help more than 1,700 customers globally manage operations, accounting, tracking, connectivity, and compliance, all with a single system. Before we start, I'd like to cover a few details. We'll be sending a recording of this presentation to all attendees so you can refer back to information you found interesting, as well as to share with your colleagues. We will conduct a few polling questions throughout this presentation, so we would love for you to participate for us to gather some interesting insights for everybody. Also, we provide time at the end of the webinar for questions and answers, so feel free to submit your questions via the question panel. You are in for a real treat today. In addition to myself, you have two very energetic and extremely knowledgeable presenters. First, I would like to introduce Scott Case. Scott is founder and chief storyteller of Position Global. Scott has been a licensed U.S. customs broker since 1994, but been in the business all his life. His father started a customs brokerage firm in Chicago in 1977 that is still open today. Scott's passion for the hardworking logistics companies in the industry who didn't know how to tell their stories led him to start Position Global in 2012. Today, Position Global provides marketing and communication services for local, national, and global logistics companies and industry trade associations, many of whose names you likely would recognize and for whom staying in touch is more important than ever during the pandemic. Next, I would like to introduce to Jose Barona. Jose is a vice president of sales here at Gaia and has more than 20 years of experience in freight operations in the logistics industry. A frequent speaker and trainer, Jose specializes in strategic alliances in Latin America, along with associations and programs that add value to our customers. Now, I'd like to hand over the presentation to Scott. Scott, please take it away.
Thank you very much, Mark. And thank you to everyone who's joining us today. We realize that particularly now, time is valuable for everyone, and you're probably pulled away from some other fire, and we sincerely appreciate the time that you're giving us today. We hope that what we're able to talk about with and share with you today are things that you're able to take back and deploy in your own businesses, as we're all just reacting to very rapidly changing conditions. So we're here today to talk about how coronavirus could impact the supply chain. There's primarily three areas that we would like to take a look at where this is happening. First, we'd like to take a look at how it's going to affect materials, factories that are trying to get products here into the United States, or conversely, US exporters who are trying to get raw materials or finished goods back out. Secondly, we'll take a look at how it's going to be impacting labor. For those of you who do business with the Port of Houston today, obviously you realize that Houston is shut down because of a COVID case that was discovered with an employee who had worked at both of the terminals down there. So Houston is currently closed. We're going to be talking a little bit about the impacts on sourcing and the fact that sourcing is increasingly difficult within the US and Europe as travel restrictions have been put in place, as border restrictions have been put in place. There's also the impact on logistics, the sheer getting it from one place to another. Are the boats running? Are the planes flying? Decreasingly, the planes are flying, particularly with the two travel bans for the United States and then reciprocal actions with the EU. And finally, the impact of the coronavirus that's going to be felt on consumers. We've seen some pretty high numbers of estimates by the Treasury Secretary of what employment could look like after that. Is that going to impact people's ability to buy goods when this is done? And that's certainly something that we're going to be concerned about here as supply chain professionals. So as we get things started, I would like to just take a moment for everybody to vote on a question that we have for everyone, and the poll's going to be coming up. And the question is this: it is going to be, how will the coronavirus impact your standard business operations? So please select one of the following. Either you cannot continue, it's going to severely restrict it, you'll be able to continue operating at a reduced level, you're experiencing little disruption, or you'll be able to continue as normal. So let's please just take a moment or two to select that. Thank you. And let's see what the results are. Okay, we've got a pretty good distribution in there. I'm glad to see that nobody is not able to continue. Severely restricted, certainly, as we're all working and probably calling in from places different than what we normally do is there. Continuing at a reduced level and little disruption. These are very positive numbers. This means that we as a supply chain are doing what we normally do in very resilient situations like that, which is finding ways to keep on going with whatever we happen to have in the pipeline. So the best thing for us to do and where we need to get started is we have to get ahead of the curve now. That's the most important part of what we're looking to do. And by getting ahead of the curve, what are some of the things that we need to think about as we're planning and trying to get ready? We've got to have a pandemic preparedness framework set up. It's very important to form a team that represents all of your critical business functions. This includes accounting, finance, sales, operation, and certainly management. And the first priority for this team is to assess the relative importance of business activities and organize them in the order of priority for response or recovery. Gaia is located in South Florida. Many people on this call today are in South Florida or in hurricane territory. Keeping in mind that whenever one of those storms starts to spin up, have to ask yourself the tough questions. What do we do? Do we have to distribute the work? Do people need to work from home for a short period of time? Once the storm has moved through, how do we resume normal business operations? These are things that while people in this part of the country have been experienced with it before, now the rest of the country is testing not just sort of their business continuity and business resumption operations, but how to actually do it for a far more prolonged period of time than any of us will have had to experience leading up to this. The next thing to keep in mind is a review of your finances. You certainly want to ensure that your organization has the necessary working capital to ride out the storm. There was a first piece of legislation that was passed by Congress and signed by the president. There's going to be follow-up legislation as well. The national emergency that was declared, states in which you operate are going to be looking for their own disaster relief recovery funds. So consider government-sponsored financial relief to support that cash flow. A good place to start is the Small Business Administration. You can see SBA.gov, but the state in which you operate is probably going to be having something available as well. So work with that, and certainly I would imagine that your accountants are also going to be keeping an eye on what's available, whether it's just direct compensation or through tax credits. So working with your local governments, working with your financial professionals will help you know what's available to you. Next, you want to be sure that you're establishing a pandemic communications program. This is something that we at Position Global have been working with our clients for the last several weeks, and in fact, the last several months. For anybody that's been in supply chain, the COVID-19 started impacting us with the prolonged closures in Asia following the Lunar New Year holiday. So for some of us, we've actually been following this as it's tracked westward across the globe, and we'll probably spend the entire first half of 2020 monitoring and reporting on it. But it's important to make sure that you're talking with people about market conditions and business operations. We like to kid around that it's a 24-hour news cycle. It's more like a 2.5-hour news cycle. Almost the second that we write something, there's a new piece of information, like Houston today, that renders it null and void. So make sure that you're communicating with people. We recommend assigning a spokesperson for the company who's the appropriate one to communicate, not just to your internal team members to keep them motivated, focused, rallied, and encouraged, but also for the people outside that are paying attention to you, to your customers, to your vendors, to your global forwarding partners. I'm sure that many of us have been getting emails for the different brands or restaurants or shops or stores that we like to go to. And a lot of those communications have been coming out literally with the CEO or the president or the leader's name on there, reassuring people. If you've got a communications program in place, make sure that your leadership's name is attached to that to help convey that gravitas to people that, yes, this is something that you're aware of, and this is something that is very, very, very serious to the health of the customers and to the health and the maintenance of the business. We also want to say to monitor and report on the situation using information from reputable sources. There's a ton of things out there. There's a ton of different sources, some of which are real, some of which are manufactured. Stick to the authorities in this situation. Certainly the World Health Organization, who's been managing the response to this on a global basis, the Centers for Disease Control, who are the lead agency here in the United States, and finally, state and local public health authorities. There's things the federal government may be putting in place and talking about in generalities, but your own state will be giving directions in specificity for what you can or can't do. Review the impact on your business operations. We have to understand the reality on the ground in countries where you're doing business or where your partners are doing business to be able to convey this information to people. So are you asking your partners, are airports and seaports open? Is road transport available and operating? Are there any quarantines that exist? And in places where there's restrictions on essential versus non-essential travel, what's deemed one versus the other? And finally, are countries between which cargo travels over land borders still open to trucks and cargo? I know within the European Union that some countries were actually setting up restrictions between their individual borders, only allowing their citizens in or out. Some are allowing the flow of commerce. Maybe the wait line in one country is 2 hours for a truck to cross the border. Someplace else it may be 8. I know in Chile that they declared a state of emergency and they're trying to figure out how to manage port operations. So speak with your partners, monitor what's happening here, and make sure you convey and communicate in the event that you need to call an audible and find another way to get your customers' cargo to or from wherever it happens to be. And certainly as we're moving people out of our respective offices and into their own homes or someplace else, we have to review IT and what are the considerations for it, because IT as a business function is an absolute must in order to be prepared for business continuity. I said on LinkedIn a couple of days ago, if there's anyone that needs to have one poured out for it, it's the IT teams right now who are scrambling to either acquire hardware or equip users and people within companies to be able to work remotely and securely. So look at remote data center management. What are the cloud options for critical systems? Before we had the cloud computing worlds, people would throw servers in the back of their car and head inland to avoid storms or just would be out of luck if they had a server or they had a power outage or they had something happen locally in their business. What are other ways to relocate that data, to relocate those operations in order to have access to them? And also consider virtual meeting and conferencing solutions. What are some of the alternative voice and chat options that are out there? Certainly, we're all familiar with platforms like this, with LogMeIn or GoToWebinars, but there's other things out there like Zoom that do video conferencing, Google Hangouts, which is available, and Slack, which a lot of people are discovering. And for me personally, I'm just recommending to folks that they not just stay in communication, but also start to engage and use some of the ones that offer a video platform, if for no other reason, that the socialization, the community, the communication that we're used to having within an office or just a closeness has gone away. And we're all trying to figure out how to be together while being apart, which almost is kind of an anathema or contrary to the way that humans like to congregate and like to socialize with one another. So think about you may not normally be the best video person. You may think ball cap and crazy background is not what you want people to see. You know what? Everybody is going through it, and it's a chance to draw closer with one another as we're all trying to get through this thing together. So we'd like to take a moment now, just based on some of the things we laid out for you, to ask, how do you feel that your business is prepared to handle the pandemic? Please choose if you feel that you're very prepared, you're somewhat prepared, or not prepared at all. And don't worry, we're not judging and nobody's names are coming up, so this is being answered totally anonymously. So let's take a look at our answers. It's about the distribution that I thought it would be. Somewhat prepared at 60%, very prepared at 21%, and not prepared at all at 19%. And that's okay, because if we were to think about it, we've said to ourselves, we expect to stock up or we expect to have to operate for several days, maybe upwards of a week, 2 weeks if necessary. This is something that might not stretch into weeks, it's going to stretch into months. And because of that, it's totally understandable that we're all trying to find our way through it. So for those folks that feel comfortable with it, congratulations for having that in place. And for those who are still trying to find their way through it, well, that's what we're here to try and encourage people to do, give them some tools, give them an understanding of the best way to go about it. So what we want to talk about now is what we're all just kind of coming to grips with today, which is the remote workforce. And if you'll allow us to just sort of parody or to borrow from a very popular series, remote is the new black, and by choice, it has to go with everything. So what do we mean by that? You're going to have to analyze the responsibilities of your new work from home or work from not in the office workforce. So take a look and figure out what job functions and responsibilities can be done in an office and which ones can be done remotely. And when you're assessing the tasks and roles and the support you have to provide them, identify specifically when remote work is either not possible because it requires being physically present, such as handling cargo in and out of a warehouse, It's possible at a cost because of additional resources above and beyond connectivity. If you have someone handling or generating original paperwork, if they need to move documents by courier and somebody's going to need an inventory of courier pouches and access to something like that, or job functions that they now have to do on their own that they couldn't go to someone and get help from, or whether or not something is highly possible because it can easily be provided with basic digital access and infrastructure. If somebody could just get by with a computer and their internet connection, that's really the lowest barrier to entry when we start to think about it for people being able to access things. So what are some of the infrastructure considerations that you're going to need when dealing with things? You're going to need to ask about whether or not you need a VPN or cloud computing. What kind of secure or restricted access does somebody have to create on their device in order to access your resources? What are the business applications that somebody's going to need? Do you need to purchase additional licenses for software or a platform that maybe you used or shared within the office? Are there mobile tools that you happen to need? Are people going to need to have access to their mobile phones? Are they going to be taking pictures or scanning documents that they would otherwise use with hardware inside of an office? You need to have unified communications. Most people, most employees are used to having their office phone number in their signature. They're not used to having their mobile number there. Maybe for sales, they're used to it, but not necessarily for operations. You're going to make sure that people are able to communicate. They can call the number that they're used to, and it's going to make its way through to the employee that they're used to speaking with. Project management tools are going to be very important. So if you're somebody who normally works in a team and gets together and has a meeting in person, maybe you need to use virtual project management tools, Asana, Monday, Basecamp. If it's applicable to your workflow, it's something to consider. Video conferencing. Do you want to be able to see people? Do you sometimes feel like you can have a better relationship, rapport, or really get an understanding of what someone is saying if you want to do it face-to-face, virtually, of course, but to see someone as opposed to just speaking with them and hearing their voice on the other end of the line? And finally, cybersecurity. It's no surprise that supply chain is a target for malware, for scammers, for ransomware. A number of companies, including Maersk, have fallen victim to ransomware. There's another Australian-based company that's just been going through it themselves. So as you have users working from home, maybe they're on their own home device. Now you've got to ask yourself, if they open up a phishing email, does that compromise their device? Does that give them access to your system? Is there a cascading effect of it? So it's not just enough to give somebody the opportunity to work from home and connect with their own device. What are the security? What is the tools to make sure that that device doesn't become a liability and become an entry point to cause trouble within your network? We've got one more poll too that we would like to ask people, and we certainly appreciate everybody's participation and their engagement on this. And so the last question that we want to ask people is this: does your company have the infrastructure in place now to support a remote workforce? With only two choices, this is a pretty easy one. Okay, and the answer is 81% of you say yes, 19% of you say no. Well, for the 81%, we're grateful that you've got that. And for the 19%, you're looking at this and you're trying to figure this out. And we're here to say to you reassuringly that it is something that can be done and can be done quickly and easily. And with that in mind, I would like to now hand the presentation over to Jose, who's going to talk about how it's possible to now bolster your technology enablement and to be able to support those cloud, those distributed workforce needs. Jose?
Great, Scott, thank you very much. Very informative, everything that you've spoken about, talking about the past, the present, and the future. And really, we all have got to be thinking about how bolster our technology enablement. At the end of the day, that's really what's going to be the biggest difference between us continuing our business or struggling while the rest of the industry continues to move on. And one way that we're doing that in Gaia is we've created the Gaia supply chain solution. It's a product and a platform that allows easy use for various roles. So we in this webinar have people who are in these roles, whether the CEO or the owner, right? They're part of an accounting team, and they're also managing the cargo themselves when they're in operations and in warehousing. At the end of the day, this is really where we're going to be looking at, having a system that's going to be able to help you be able to manage what's going to happen in every one of these different from top to bottom. So if we start from the CEO and the business owner, you want to have full visibility of what's going on. right now, everyone has lost visibility, or at least physical visibility, of their work staff. This morning I had a meeting with most of my sales staff, and we were scattered in 8 different countries, working together and saying, hey, what needs to happen next? Where are all of you? And I think all of us right now as business owners are looking for ways to continue to have that visibility without really looking at our workforce. So when you look at the visibility, what are we talking about? We're looking at sales. How many quotes do we have? We're looking at operations, the waybills that are being created, looking at the countries and how they're being affected. And again, looking at the actual physical part of the warehouse and how it comes in. So all of that stuff is what we're looking at. At the same time, we've got to continue running the business. So the accounting part of it is so important. Here we have a full integrated system that allows you to be able to deliver a tool set and functionality for your people to do what they do. So you're able to run your reports, be able to go ahead and get your balance sheets, not only to the CEO, but also everyone else down the supply chain. You're really going to look at how strong your supply chain is right now, specifically in this time, because you'll be able to connect with your customers, their final customer, and those carriers that are being affected, even the countries. You gave the example of Chile. We looked at some countries in Central and South America who have completely closed off their borders. So we're able to see how we're able to connect with these people and give them the right information, specifically the accounting information. And last but not least, very important, the warehousing and operations managers. Your warehouse is the way of life. As a former, logistics person now doing software, the warehouse was the most important thing we had, because that's where we really got a hold of the person's cargo, a hold of the commodity, really started the process of making sure that it got to where it needed to go, that it was labeled accordingly. Well, guess what? That continues to happen now. In this case here, you're able to easily manage your workflow with efficiency of the operations. You can do a lot more with less. That's really what software is about. And looking at where we are now, we have to find different ways of doing more with less. Doing more with less visibility, at least physical visibility, correct? So in this case here, we're looking at features that are accessible from the cloud that give you all that information of control for your business on a remote location. So if we look here and we look at the final benefits of the Gaia supply chain, if we look at the cloud is where it's at. When we started 20 years ago, it was tough to say that we were working remotely. Fax was a groundbreaking technology. Well, now the technology that everyone's talking about is the cloud, where things are in the cloud. And really, these are the things that we bring to the table. So when you start looking at your business and starting square one, is how can I get my data secure? Where can I go ahead and move this information that allows my people across different places to access this information? So the first thing you want to look at is the IT cost savings that you're going to have. You're going to look at the backup of your system data. That is the most important thing that you have. What really separates you from one person to the next, it's really the amount of data that you have and how secure your data is. You're going to be shipping to the same places, right? You're going to be using the same ports, but really that backup of your system data was key. You want to have a quick implementation. You want to get to a fast time to profitability. That's really the case if you're going to go ahead and have this prolonged, as prolonged as it may be. Yesterday, the president said it may take up to 18 months. A report came out said it may take to 18 months to do this. So yes, we are seeing recovery. We are seeing that wheels start to spin in other countries, but we're just here in the United States, just starting to catch up to that and really seeing how the effects are going to be. Scott, you gave us the example in Texas. That is real close to me. I've been in Houston for the last 9 years now. I'm in South Florida, so I know how important it is for those ports to completely shut down for a couple of days. So we'll see how that is. So service availability. How are your customers being able to continue to work with you while there is a shutdown of a specific port? We look at the business continuity. That's important. Every one of the customers that you work with are looking to you to get advice, to tell them what's going to happen next. And you really need to have that information and that background to be able to say, here's what we're doing, here's where we're at, here's what we're going to do next. And that's really why they do business with you. You finally want to have access to automatic updates. The latest and greatest thing is only as good as the latest update that you had. So it's important to have that, and you get that within the Gaia cloud. And you want to look at the security advantages. That disaster recovery is so important when these things start to happen. Most of you are working on a local server. And the example that Scott gave, hey, let's take the server home. That's the disaster recovery. You've got to be thinking outside of the box and saying, hey, where can I put this on someone's cloud where I can access it at any time? You want to be able to scale your business. Right now, you may just be thinking in parts. And you're sitting here saying, you know what? This is all great, guys, but what I really need is just to get my warehouse up and going. That's really what's the most important thing. I worry about typing my airway bills because I can always go back to doing that. This is important. Having a system that will allow you to scale the different parts of your business as those needs start growing. And again, the mobility, being flexible in these types of times. I think all of us that are in logistics can go ahead and take pride that we can move from point A to point B with no problem, and we'll find a way. Well, right now, that mobility is going to be tested. And the first thing that you got to look at is your technology stack. And finally, you've got to look at the people who are supporting you. You have to understand you're not in it alone. You've got to have state-of-the-art global support, and that's the experience we want to bring you. You want to be able to talk to someone and say, hey, I have this issue. Can you help me with this? Hey, I'm not in the cloud. How can I get to the cloud and get people who can support you? At the end of the day, we want to make sure that we can go ahead and get the support that we give our clients, also the support that you will be able to get from these providers. So, Scott, you did a great job, man. Thank you very much. You made us think outside the box of what's really happening right now. We want to open this up to a few questions. Again, if you have any questions in what you're seeing, you can go to www.magaia.com. You can have solutions@magaia.com or my personal email. We'd love to talk to you and help you in any way we can. And finally, our phone number there's always someone there to answer it. That's important. So thank you very much for being with us. We want to open this time over for some questions. Scott, I think you may already have a couple of questions for us that you texted me while I was talking.
Yeah, that we did. We had a couple of come in. And again, I want to say thank you to everybody on this call, because as much as I mean, doctors, nurses, healthcare workers are on the front lines of trying to stop this, and we're all doing our bit to flatten the curve. The thing that's going to help keep us out of the worst of trouble is going to be keeping the supply chain moving. And the people that are on this call are the ones that are responsible for that. And you all deserve an absolute round of applause for doing that through probably more difficult circumstances than most of us have seen in our lifetime. So from me personally, as somebody who's been around it since birth, to everybody here, thank you so very much. One of the questions that came in first, Mark, I wanted to direct it to you. People are concerned because they're now working from home. A number of technology or another home internet companies have what they call bandwidth limits. So in other words, just the amount that you can use of internet before they start charging you. Certainly people with kids at home are probably discovering that they're doing a lot more streaming than they otherwise did. Is somebody working from home going to see an impact on either their home network or the amount of data that they're using if they've got a remote workforce connecting into their Magaia instance?
That's a really good question, actually. The short answer is no, not at all. The footprint of it's one of the unique things about the cloud, right? The kind of the server in the sky, if you will, where your Magaia solution sits. It allows you to operate and do things within the solution, and the footprint is very, very light. So whatever the delay, latency is the term in the industry, whatever the latency that you're seeing today, which is the delay between clicking on different websites and different pages, that'd be the same delay that you'll see while using the Magaia solution in our cloud. It won't increase that delay or that latency by using the solution. So very, very good question, but the footprint is light, so you'll see no issues from a bandwidth perspective or from a data limit perspective.
Awesome. And realizing it too, Mark, is just kind of a dovetail to that. If you're somebody who doesn't have a cloud-based infrastructure set up so far with the Magaia cloud, what are you seeing for implementation time? Since obviously the clock has already started, and everybody's just feeling the pressure to be able to make sure that they don't lose any time in being able to work with a remote workforce.
Yeah, so the demand for is getting high, as you can imagine, right? As people are predominantly now beginning to work remotely. So we're no more than a week, but sometimes as quick as a couple of days. And what that entails is we'll take your Magaia system that sits on your own server now within your facility. we'll work with our implementation department, and we migrate that system over into our Gaia cloud, which then opens it up to your team members, whoever would need to access it remotely from the central location of the office.
Great. And
another
question.
Team members, just as a note, they can be scattered all across the globe, so they don't just have to be in the United States. You can have team members all over the globe accessing it.
Wonderful. And one of the other questions that came in is, will the IT team continue to provide support as normal? I was down at the facility a couple of weeks ago, and it was absolutely jam smash packed with humans. And now I think, as you said in our prep, it's a ghost town.
Yeah, I mean, typically the IT team is your personal IT team is who you typically would go through. That's who you'd route all your questions to, and then if it was not something within their network, then they would work with our support desk and help figure out what problem that might be to clear up any issues. But they'll still manage any kind of software related type of questions outside of the Gaia solution, and we'll now manage all the hardware, all the storage, all that kind of thing that they would typically manage if it were on their own server.
And you're in a fully remote workforce now as of this week, correct?
Yeah, that's Gaia as of effective this week. Actually, effective last week, we went to a fully remote workforce. So we use the Gaia solution as well as all of our other solutions that we have to run the Gaia business. We have a company of about 130 employees that worked out of the Gaia headquarters there in Miami, and now we are all 100% working remotely with the same, as I mentioned, no latency issues or anything. But yes, we are all working remotely. Help stop the spread of this virus.
And you're just dodging toward it. Yeah, Jose.
Yeah, if I can chime in, you're never going to really let go of your IT. Your IT is crucial to your growth. When we mean about having IT costs, we really meant, hey, we'll manage your data where it's at. The IT will help. They are part of our team. We are kind of like a side provider of that IT department, because they'll handle your connections locally. We'll handle your connections remotely. Really, we work together.
Yep. And Mark, you're busy dodging tornadoes in your neck of the woods where you're stationed at. So I'm glad that you're keeping safe as well.
That's right. Thank you.
Somebody inquired where the servers are located that are supporting the cloud.
We have a couple of data centers.
Yeah, we have.
And one of them is in Texas, in the Texas area. The other one is in South Florida. As you know, you gave the example that here in South Florida, we're always ready for hurricanes. So we do have them here, and it is a 24-hour. They can run with no electricity. I think it's over 90 days. So the idea is for them to be able to run with no impact to the final customer that we have. And they're both like a RAID type of system. If something happens out here, we have the system in Dallas that can also pick it up from there.
And a follow-on question to that is, the Gaia server isolated from virus risks if the system is being accessed over a remote desktop from a home computer? So to the cybersecurity question that we have, if somebody is using their home machine that maybe does or doesn't have levels of virus protection on it, does that then insulate going upstream into the Gaia connectivity?
It's a very good question. We have protection. We have virus protection on our cloud. We do have customers who have had actually hackers take over the computer and they've never been able to access the cloud system itself. Again, every customer's responsibility in the case of those connections. We always have to be vigilant to that. But yes, that is an ongoing thing of customers being attacked on a daily basis when it comes to this type of connections.
Okay. And Mark and Jose, we've all been at this thing for a couple of years. I mean, like I said, I've been around it all my life. Mark, you've been at it for 20 years. I mean, I could personally tell you that I've never been through anything like this. I mean, we certainly had post 9/11 with the planes grounded when cargo just flat out didn't move because the conveyances were precluded from doing that. I mean, have you ever? I mean, obviously there is nothing comparable to what we're going through, but I mean, how do you feel about this thing? I mean, just the way we're having to sort of adapt and adjust on a really rapid pace.
Well, you know, if you look back at 9/11, similar to what we're seeing now, it definitely had major impacts on business and on trade. What's significantly different in this instance is that we're being asked, right, by our government and CDC to stay away from one another, right? For social distancing is the term that's out there. But at the same time, we are all still, you know, we still need to eat, we still need to have toiletries, we still need all the things that our businesses do, shipping product, we still need those things. So we're in a unique situation, unlike in, you know, in 9/11, where we didn't have the capability to really work remotely. We now have the unique ability to be able to do our day-to-day jobs remotely from our homes or wherever we might want to do that remotely. And still be as productive as if we were in the office. It is definitely a unique situation, something we haven't seen before, but the fact that we can work remotely and still be productive makes it a lot nicer.
And it's funny too, because it's like I've said to a couple people that I feel like time is passing for me like it passes for my dogs lately. 7 years to every 1 year, but I can't remember if it was last year or just a couple of years ago when the viral clip of the man on the BBC who had his son come in while the BBC was conducting the interview, and everybody thought, oh my goodness, how unusual is that? How could that possibly happen? And I can only imagine just how all around the world a lot of people are meeting people's children, their dogs, their spouses, lots of people making lots of new friends. And while it was a novelty then, it's probably going to be de rigueur for a period of time now. We don't have any other questions, Mark. Do you want to wrap it up and bring it home, or would you like for me to do that?
Well, I just want to say thank you. I'll wrap it up. I want to say thank you to everybody who's been on this phone. Whether if you're a Gaia customer, if you're a Gaia prospect, meaning you're interested in looking into the Gaia solution, or whether you're just somebody who wanted to understand some of the options for working remotely, we would love to help answer any more of your questions that weren't answered on this webinar. Again, we will send the recording out to everybody that was on the phone. But please reach out to Jose Barahona, as you see his email there below, or call our main number. Again, we're working remotely, so although our receptionist isn't in our headquarters office, she still will answer your phone call and get you routed to the right person. But one final piece, you know, especially as we look at some of our prospects and some of our existing customers, you know, this coronavirus was obviously very unexpected. And so probably the fact that you're on this phone call trying to figure out how to plan to work remotely and how to plan for this virus is also unexpected. And anything that you do more than likely is also unbudgeted. We understand that completely, and we are absolutely ready to work with you and lessen the cost in this time. And as you talk to Jose, or whether you talk to your account manager or account executive, we'll kind of tell you what your options are there, but we're going to work with you to make sure that the cost is lower than it might normally be during this tough time for all of us. So again, I want to say thank you to everybody. Appreciate your time very much, and hope you all stay safe and healthy out there.
Thank you, Mark.
Take care.